Let's start, Ben, with the more recent development, which is an update on what we talked about last Monday, and that has to do with Paul Finebaum, the ESPN and SEC network analyst who, when we were talking last about him, had seemingly announced, although not officially, his intention to run for U.S. Senate in Alabama. And you and I got the fallout from this dead wrong because we both thought he would kind of just move forward business as usual after this interview that he did with Clay Travis where he discussed his intentions. And that seemingly is not what happened because Finebaum did appear on Get Up the following day or two after the September 30th interview. He did appear on the Matt Berry podcast on Sunday, but it would appear that a lot of his other typical ESPN television appearances did not come to pass. Clay Travis followed that up. On3 appeared to verify that Finebaum or his camp or somebody around him is receiving that as a sidelining, a suspension. You never want to be too concrete with whatever we want to call this, Ben, but there were some ramifications here on ESPN's part, and Finebaum finds himself in the position that a lot of people have at ESPN when they step outside of the boundaries, step over a line when it comes to politics. What were your thoughts on this surprise update Monday morning?
Well, we also have another surprise update here as we are live, and that's from Austin Karp of the Sports Business Journal, who reports that Finebaum was never banned and that he'll be on First Take on Tuesday. And so this feels a little bit like North Carolina posting the Drake May highlight on Monday morning as it goes viral that Bill Belichick has banned North Carolina from posting about Patriots players. Like it very much feels kind of reactionary. I don't know that to be a fact, but this wasn't one. Even if this was just Clay Travis, I think Clay Travis has a pretty good source on this. Like he's the one who got the interview with Finebaum, where Finebaum at least, talked about all this and announced his potential intentions of running for office. And then
we should say too, right, that Bill Hoffheimer from ESPN, a longtime representative on the PR team over there, immediately took to Twitter to deny this, which is rare to see happen either. So there's a lot of strongly worded things on both sides here that's even with the news that he's going to be on First Take tomorrow. That almost confuses me more.
The other thing, though, is you just go back and look at the appearances. He was on ESPN less last week than he is typically on during the football season. And he was on Tuesday, which was the day after all of this broke. And then he wasn't on the rest of the week. And so he still did the SEC network. He still did Matthew Berry's podcast. Like he was still making those kind of secondary appearances, but he was not on like ESPN flagship, which he typically is on a pretty regular basis throughout the football season. So, if he wasn't
including
banned
Sunday mornings, right, when he's typically on Sports Center, and that's usually a pretty viral segment because it's him just riffing through all the outcomes from Saturday, and that wasn't there this week either.
Yeah, and he's on First Take usually, or at least pretty regularly on Monday mornings. He wasn't on this morning. I don't think he was on last week either, but he was on less, and so that has to be explained. And I think ESPN's like in a really tough spot. In some part through its own doing because of the standard it has set with Stephen A. Smith and that they have let Stephen A. Smith, pontificate on politics and express his own desire to potentially run for office. And even if, I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it does create the perception of a double standard. And it does allow people to think, or at least, tout the idea that Paul Finebaum expressed that he's going to run for office or potentially run for office as a Republican, and then he got pulled from air. Meanwhile, Stephen A. Smith is saying that he wants to run as a Democrat for president, and he remains on air. And I know that's not what's actually happening here.
Do you think people are dumb enough to believe that?
Yes.
People who approach this story with an open mind, somebody who might find this video on YouTube from you and I, or open up the news app on Monday when they have a lunch break, who aren't in the middle of the internet bullshit all the time and just are like, what's going on with Paul Finebaum? You think that that's going to convince them? Because to me, like, the very clear distinction is two distinctions between how Stephen A. has handled himself and how Finebaum what he said in that original September 30th interview with Clay Travis. To me, the first one is Finebaum was far more specific about what office he would run. I guess president isn't exact, but like the timeline of it, the race, the candidacy, the campaigning, people that have talked to him specifically, and if Donald Trump said to do it, I couldn't say no. Like, way more literal and detailed than anything Stephen A. Smith has blustered about on The View or something. I know that there's similarities. I know it's not, but he can't run for president right now, and we all know that, and we all know that it's a generalized kind of a conversation. I think if Stephen A. Smith started to run for president, ESPN would probably have to respond in kind. And I think that the other distinction is that, and this one is actually where my mind went first when I saw, this actually had some legs to it, which is that Paul Finebaum said on the record in that interview, I voted for Donald Trump, but ESPN doesn't let me say that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the type of stuff, whether you're talking about Bill Simmons or any other number of people, even whatever might have happened behind the scenes with Pat McAfee, like, when you start to discuss the behind the scenes of the company, we most likely are going to see some action, right? And Stephen A. Smith has never said anything like that. And if you give Stephen A. credit for anything, it's that he's always incredibly careful to not say that type of thing publicly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's what Bill Simmons was like, I dare you to suspend me. And and ESPN then suspended him. Like, I think that's the difference here. I think the other difference, as you alluded to, is Paul Finebaum probably is going to run for office. Like, it seems like he is, although he hasn't officially announced it. And that's what, Clay Travis is hanging on to is, hey, he's only speculating about it the same way Stephen A. is speculating about it. But I think the difference is, like, I don't think Stephen A. Smith is going to run for president. And if he does run for president, that's still a couple of years away. Paul Finebaum, it seems like this is going to be a pretty sped up. Like, you could do contextual clues here and see he's probably going to run. But
maybe there's already machinations behind the scenes that ESPN knows about that are already moving forward, and they just don't want to be associated as strongly. That could easily be part of it too, right?
For sure. I think my counter, though, would be how many people are approaching this, like, with an open mind. How many people know the nuance and the details, and, well, actually what he would be punished for is calling out ESPN's anti-politics. I just think people see he talked about running for office. He's a Republican. Stephen A. Smith talked about running for office. He's a Democrat. One of them's still on the air. The other one's not. I think that's a pretty powerful tool if you're Paul Finebaum and you're getting to launch a Senate campaign is, hey, I'm choosing this over my professional career and all the anti-establishment stuff and all the woke Disney, woke ESPN stuff. Like, that is stuff that would theoretically work in his favor in a Alabama Republican primary.
I hear you, and you're probably not wrong in the big picture, but ESPN is also, I would say, the vast majority of people, just by way of who happens to work for that network, who they've punished for engaging in political chatter of any kind over the years, have almost universally been liberal. So the idea that ESPN brings the hammer down on the Republicans all the time is like not really a thing that you can say concretely. I get that.
You have Sage Steele. You have Allison Williams. Like, you have examples.
Yeah. Yeah. But you also have Dan Le Batard and Bill Simmons and
for sure
Jamel Hill. And, so I don't know. I think you're definitely not wrong if there's an opportunity for Finebaum or anybody around him who is invested in him entering and winning this race to turn it into some kind of narrative. I definitely think it's likely we see that. Hey, the media
I think that's already
biased
happening
against us, and so I don't disagree with that. But I guess just to try to thread the needle of the Stephen A. thing, like, I think there are pretty obvious differences besides the political affiliation that I would hope could come through to a more maybe sports-centric or sports media nerd audience even if the political theater of it is obviously going to play out how it's going to play out.